So for this one who don't know me, I am Miguel Aras. I am a Spanish physician and also a father of a girl with Dravet syndrome. And for the last 12 years, I have been involved in the promotion and acceleration of scientific and tech projects. And this year I am the scientific director for the Federation. So I am the contact for all of you in these scientific issues you consider. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce Julian Isla, that it is the speaker of this first webinar. The webinar, the title of the webinar is How Europe Approves Medicine for Rare Disease and the Importance of Having Data. For a personal point of view, some of you know that Julian and me, we have spent a lot of hours working together in this fight against Dravet syndrome, and I think it has been a successful collaboration with great results. So, for this personal point of view, it's a pleasure always to be listening to Julian and to be spending time with him. And from a more professional side, it's also very important to have something that it is deeply involved in the approval process of drugs, because in the end, it is something very, very, very important for all of us. No? And also something very involved in the process of to bring technology solutions to our needs and the management of data. So Julian is member of the committee of the Orphan Medicinal Products in the European Medicine Agency, and with a profile of as software engineer, specialized in data and artificial intelligence, is one of the experts of patient-oriented technology. So let's listen to Julian, and we will come back after the talk to have time to questions and answers. So Julian.
Thank you so much, Luis Miguel, for the nice introduction, and thank you for the Dravet European Federation for the invitation and for organizing this webinar that we are starting today with a very important topic, as Luis already mentioned. The goal that we have is to give you some educational pieces about how Europe approves drugs for rare diseases. And because of my role with the EMA and my collaboration with the EMA for the last 7 years, I have the privilege and the responsibility to represent this community for different products. And the idea of today is to be able to explain how this works and the importance of patient engagement on that process. Because we only have 20 or 30 minutes, because we want to spend some time for questions, I will speed up a little bit for the presentation. Well, this is my declaration of interest and also my CV, and also just to let you know that on this session, I'm not representing the EMA. The opinions of that session are my own opinions. In any case, the presentation I'm going to use is an official presentation for the EMA. Is the presentation that the EMA provide to me to explain how is the organization of the EMA and how is the relationship with patients. And the outline is simple, is to explain how EMA is organized, the journey of the patient engagement, and how EMA is being engaged is generation connection with patients, and the patient involvement in pre-submission and the different phases of drug development. So what the EMA does? The EMA, is an agency from the European Commission. It's a very important, it's a legal detail, but the official role of the EMA is to be an agency of the European Commission. The EMA is providing recommendations to the European Commission. I mean, so it's not a separated entity. is an agency of the European Commission, and the role of the EMA is to provide recommendations, and the European Commission use these recommendations to make law and official statements, right? So this is a very important concept because it's not a separate entity. It's part of the European Commission, and most of the roles that we have at the EMA are nominated by the European Commission as well. Is about drugs for humans and animals. This is something people is not very aware of, right? But EMA is responsible just for drugs, not medical devices, and humans and animals, both. And is approval and monitoring as well. Monitoring in terms of safety and pharmacovigilance. This is the total number of people, and the 4,000 people is because EMA is counting the staff and the experts, you know, because there are a lot of people working with around the EMA doing regulatory science. The staff member is around 800 people, and the other people are experts like me joining for the different committees. The different committees are the 7 committees that you can see right here. Is plenty of you know, acronyms, but for you the most important committees are the CHMP, which is the committee, the first one. This is the committee who is giving the marketing authorization, very popular after COVID-19 vaccines, because it's the committee responsible for giving the marketing authorization. The COMP, and this is my committee, is the committee for orphan drugs. And the PDCO. The PDCO is for pediatric drugs. When a drug is coming and the indication is for pediatric population, the PDCO is also involved during the assessment of the drug. And also for, you know, new therapies or advanced therapies, or gene therapy, is the CAT. The CAT is the Committee for Advanced Therapies as well. So you can see it's super complex and different committees, a lot of interactions, and a lot of work as well. And also the EMA is connected with the national agencies. You know, and the EMA has representative for the national agencies. Every country in Europe has a national agency for drugs, and the EMA is like the European connection for all of them, and also the connection to the European Commission, as already explained. Drugs in Europe can be approved in 2 ways. The first way is the centralized procedure, and is if you are able to get marketing authorization from the EMA, you have a marketing approval, a marketing authorization for all the countries. Because of the decisions of the European Commissions, they have legal binding in all the members of the European Union. The other possibility is to go to the different countries one by one. For example, if you are a company developing a drug and you want to, for example, go to the French agency, you can go there, ask for marketing authorization, and you will have a license, a marketing authorization just for France. This is possible as well. But for you and for the Dravet community, the most important thing you need to know is for orphan drugs, the procedure has to be centralized. This is mandatory, it's a European law, and we have to go to the EMA, the companies have to go to the EMA, and they are not able to go country by country. Because the European Commission, when they created the law, they realized that you know there is a lot of benefits for patients if we use a centralized procedure. It's the same thing, for example, for COVID-19 vaccines. The procedure was centralized, and the EMA released a marketing authorization for the vaccines for all the European territory. UK is, after Brexit, is unfortunately away of this process. Right now, UK is following a national process for marketing authorization, and they have a national agency evaluating drugs for UK. This is just some details about this, you know, and you can find on this. We will distribute the slides after the call, more information about the different therapies. And as I already said, orphan drugs are centralized. This is the most important topic for you after this slide. Something that EMA is not doing. You know, when you are explaining what the agency is doing, you have to explain what they are not doing. The EMA is not authorizing clinical trials. This is responsible for the countries, the national agencies. Pricing, availability, not responsible for EMA. The national countries are responsible for pricing, and availability is depending on the strategy of the pharmaceutical companies. Advertising, no. In front, the role of the EMA is to provide information, but not making advertisement. We are not responsible to put patients of medicines. Doctors are prescribers for drugs, not the EMA. Another important distinction is the EMA is not responsible for medical devices, just medicines, drugs, and absolutely not responsible for homeopathic and other alternative therapies as well as food supplementants and cosmetics. And also the EMA is not responsible for development treatment guidelines. This is a medical responsibility for the doctors and the medical societies. The EMA was created in 1995. The COM was created on 1999, if I remember well. And 1 year after, the patients become committee members. And this is an important milestone, right? Because when the EMA decided to engage patients, the EMA made a big step. The decision was to put patients in the committees with the same rights and obligations that other member states. So, for example, during the COM sessions, I have to vote. I have to express my opinion, and can be positive or negative, as other member states. And this is a strong power because we are 3 patients in the committee. We have more representation than any country in Europe. And this is a big, when people is talking about patient engagement, I always put the example of the EMA as a good example of putting patients in the center. Because putting patients in the center is not about, you know, making a tick on the box when you are doing a meeting. I have a patient. No, it's about empowering patients with power. And this is a very, very important step that the EMA did 20 years ago. And after this initial step, a lot of different activities has been done, like creating the patient consumer working party, making public engagement with different departments in the EMA, and also engage patients in crisis management. For example, we have a problem with a particular drug, a virtual team is created, people from different committees is asked to be part of this virtual team, and also patients and patient organizations. The Orphan Drug Committee, my committee, the COM, COMP, Committee for Orphan and Medical Products. This committee is responsible for orphan drug designation for all rare diseases in Europe. And as I already explained, I'm patient representative. This is my second mandate. Every mandate is for 3 years, and I'm nominated by the European Commission. There is a strong, screening and process in order to apply and be nominated. And it's the same level that other member states, so it's a full role. And I have the privilege of bringing the voice of the Dravet community to the EMA for the last 6 or 7 years. The next slide is the most important one. You have to remember, don't try to remember, right? You can print it and try to and use the print for reference in the future. But this is a very important and a very important slide to understand how is the what the process is, what is happening from the beginning. At the beginning, we have, for example, a researcher in one hospital or a doctor. This guy has an idea. Oh, maybe I can use this drug for Dravet syndrome. Okay, so when you have an idea in science, you have to prove. You have to do an experiment. to check if your hypothesis is correct or not. So this person probably will do the first experiments to check if this is working, and not to humans, because it will be very, very dangerous and very risky. The first experiments are done with cells or animals in most of cases. Or right now the people is doing experiments also with computers, right? They are trying to find new drugs and they use computers for this. If you use computers, this is an in silico model. If you use cells, this is an in vitro model. And if you are using animals, is in vivo. In silico, computers. In vitro, cells. In vivo, animals. If this is positive and you really believe that your idea can work, the next step is to try to collect some clinical data, if this is possible. I mean, you identify some patients, and you usually it's a small number of patients, and you try to collect data from them. One example, for example, was fenfluramine. When the doctors behind fenfluramine started to collect clinical data, if I remember well, I guess Dr. Keulemans, recruit some patients from the clinic, from the hospital or the clinical where he was working, in order to collect the minimal data and check if the drug was working on humans as well. For this, you need approval from the national agency. It's not a clinical trial, but you need approval, because every step you are doing with humans need approval for the national authorities. If this is successful and everything looks wonderful and the drug is working for example, Dravet patients, the sponsor, who is the person who is initiating this process, can submit the proposal for orphan drug to EMA. And this is a document that the sponsor is sending to the EMA. And this is the document we discussed at COMP at the really beginning. This is the first discussion. This is the official name, first discussion. And in this discussion at the COMP, we check if there is medical plausibility for the hypothesis, if there is significant benefit, if the indication is very well established. For example, if the condition is in orphanage, and also the prevalence, the number of people, to make sure the prevalence is under the umbrella of an orphan disease. In Europe, it is less than 5 patients for 10,000 patients. 10,000. This is the average to consider a condition of rare disease. If this is positive and the committee believes that the sponsor has data, the prevalence is okay, the condition is orphan, and there is medical plausibility and also significant benefit, voila, the sponsor can have an orphan drug designation. But this is the first step. We are here, right, on this red star. This is the first step. If this is positive, the next step is to start clinical trials. A clinical trial is a scientific process to identify efficacy. And something relevant for clinical trials is you have to use placebo. The main difference between a clinical trial and getting clinical data is, in a clinical trial, you are using placebo, looking for efficacy. If you are doing the clinical trials and this is positive, you are at the end of the road. You can ask for marketing authorization, and the CHMP discuss this proposal. This is the big meeting for pharmas and sponsors, right? The discussion with CHMP is the final discussion, and usually it's not just one discussion. There are oral explanations. You have to come back with data, have discussion with the committee. Maybe the committee is suggesting a change in the indication or whatever. And at the end, if everything is positive, you have a marketing authorization, And after this, the product comes to us, to the comp, and we check if we maintain the orphan designation. So the orphan designation is a condition for drugs that the company has to maintain, to get at the beginning and maintain at the end of the clinical trials. So at this stage, we check if everything is okay, if prevalence is still okay, and the most important thing is if significant benefit is present. But we'll be back to significant benefit right now. We can park the significant benefit thing right now, and we'll be back. When this is done and the company has the orphan designation, well, the next step is quite tricky, which is go for a HTA in health technology assessment. And usually this is done by different countries. And in this process, the most important thing is to make the calculation between price and benefit. This is the first step when we are discussing price. Okay, is to make sure if the value of the drug is enough to justify the price. And when this is done and we have a price, the company has to discuss pricing with national authorities, usually are the ministries in the different countries. And if everything is positive, reimbursement, which is the process to be reimbursed for the drug. And at the end, really the end, the patient has the drug. So as you can see, it's an obstacle race, right? It's a little bit complex, it's challenging, and it takes years. If I remember well, when some of the products that we are having right now in the early stage, they started the discussion with the EMA 8 years ago, something like that. So usually having the drug in the market takes minimum 5 years, or something like that. It's a lot of time. The situation with COVID-19 vaccines is an exception. It's an exception, right? When people is saying, oh, well, but we are able to develop vaccines in a very fast way. This is because the extraordinary circumstances around vaccines and the need for them, and also the money that the public sector, companies, everybody invested in development of the vaccines. So, well, what about patients? Patients are needed because the patients are producing data. When we are doing a clinical trial, the patient is producing data for efficacy. When we are evaluating significant benefit, the patient is producing data. So coming back to the situation where patients are needed, for significant benefit, we need information from patients right here in the orphan drug designation and during the maintenance of the orphan drug designation. For clinical data is during the clinical studies. Benefit at cost is mainly for pricing and reimbursement right here. So on these different stage, there are patient engagement in different steps as well, but they are the most important ones for data generation. Talking about data, you know, and the different stages, if we are checking significant benefit, we already talk about this important concept, right? Significant benefit is a simple question. Is the new drug provide a perceived benefit from patient? Yes or not? Usually, you know, regulatory bodies make this very complicated, using questionnaires, using studies, multiple questions, a lot of things, right? But the ultimate question is very simple. Is that you are in a new drug, are you better or not? It's a very simple question, but you know, for different reasons, it's getting very complicated. And it's very important for the designation and for the marketing authorization. And unfortunately, we don't have a good mechanism to collect that information. Clinical data is obtained during clinical studies and is collected by physicians, CROs, and they give this data to the pharma. And it's very controlled and very regulated. There are strong processes in order to make sure this data has high quality and to identify who is capturing the data to preserve the quality of the data. And the latest is the benefit cost. Is okay, the company is asking for that money. And does the drug has this value or not? That's a very complicated question, right? Because usually you have to do calculations about pharmacoeconomics, or a similar word, right? The combination of how drugs are affecting the economy, not just the economy of the family, the economy of the government who is going to pay this drug. And in the issue in rare diseases is the cost for rare orphan drugs is very high, most of the times, very, very high compared with other drugs. Significant benefit. This is the official explanation of the in the regulation. You know, you can find here, and the definition is very simple. You know, is does the drug provide significant benefit for the people affected by the condition, yes or not? And the issue is when I started to work with the EMA, we struggled with this question for not just for Dravet, for other conditions as well. But I will show you an example that we did last year, and the exercise we did was very good. The goal was to, you know, provide information from the patient community for significant benefit. And so we did a survey managed by the Dravet Federation, and probably some of you participate on that survey. And we asked to you 6 or 7 questions about significant benefit, but in a simple way. We were very successful because we collect data from all these countries. Some people, for example, some countries were very active. Germany, Italy, thank you so much. People from Germany, people from Italy, very, very well done. And but at the end, we have a very good number from the European community regarding significant benefit for this drug. And we present this data to the EMA on that way, you know, with some stratification about age, to show the stratification by the age of the patient, and some information about previous treatment. And the most important thing was this question about quality of life, how the medication improve quality of life for the patient. We make this interesting chart proving this information, and at the end we show these results to the EMA. And you can see here in a very graphic way how most of the patients they consider that the drug provides a significant benefit. We did it in a very simple way, and the CHMP reviewed this document, and they say the work we did was very good, and this information helped a lot during the discussion for this drug. And also, if you have the data, you are able to react very quickly, because the committee also asked to us, okay, but you can provide data split by pediatric population and adults. We did it, and we provide the data in 1 day, I guess. We were very agile to react to this demand. If you have the data, you are able to be agile. So the webinar also is to let you know about the importance of collecting data, because we face the problem of not having data different times. I remember the first day I joined the comp 7 years ago, the comp asked me a very specific question. How many people is taking Sterepental in Europe from your community? And I say, no idea. I didn't have any idea about that, but we react very, very well, very fast as well, and we organize another survey and we collect data in 1 week. But that's the problem, you know, we have to make ad hoc surveys every time the EMA is asking to us. We don't have the information. And the problem we are seeing is that families, caregivers are starting to have the survey fatigue, which is a lot of people is asking for information to us. It would be nice to have just one place to give this information, to everybody, and don't bother me about doing multiple surveys every month. So in the Federation, we want to work on that issue and provide a solution to you guys, as caregivers, as families, to give that information once and not having to put information in different places every month. Because data is powerful for decisions. Right now, everybody's fighting for data, the researchers they need for creating knowledge, the physician they need for clinical trials, the pharma needs for developing the product, the EMA needs for regulatory use, the European Commission needs the data for HTA, and the country needs it as well. But who is capturing this information? The data is being produced in different ways. And we have pharma collecting most of the data. They are doing research, clinical trials, clinical studies, drug use, adverse effects, patient follow-up. And yeah, we have to ask and we are asking to pharma when we are working with them to make sure when the data is captured, the data is published and the data can be available for other people. This is something that most of the patient organizations are doing right now. We really want to make sure the data created from patients is reusable and fundable. From your point of view, if somebody is asking data to you, you have to check if the data will be open and accessible. It's a very important check for you. If somebody is asking for a survey and is offering an Amazon voucher for your data, think about, okay, is my data going to be available and accessible? Yes or not? Check who is going to be the owner of the data, okay? Because the owner is an important question. The owner is making decisions. And following GDPR, the European regulation, the owner has a lot of responsibilities for the data. As for the primary and secondary use of the data, sometimes the people is very clear with the primary use. I'm going to do a research. Yes, but in most of the cases, the research is being used for marketing authorization, reimbursement, and pricing. It's okay. We want to help. We want to help the industry to make these steps. Absolutely. We are not saying that the industry, the pharma is the devil and they are doing bad things. Not at all. Not at all. We as citizens decided that commercial companies will produce drugs and we have to help with data. But we have to make sure the data can be used by others. When you are working in a data collection process, think about the conflict of interest of the people collecting the data. For example, if you are working with a particular researcher or a particular person or institution or physician, is looking for transparency. Is interesting to know if there is some financial interest between this institution or this person and the industry behind. And the most important thing is make sure data is fair. What fair means? FAIR is an acronym. Is an acronym of FAER, right? It's not fair saying in the English meaning. The Europe's recommendation one of the latest in the Rare 2030 recommendation, which is the latest publication from Eurordis, is recommended that data generated from patients will be fair. FAIR means this. Is the acronym FAIR F comes from Findable. And the data has to be searchable and published. People need to know that the data exists. It's very simple. If somebody is capturing data and they are using by themselves, and the people is not aware that the data exists, the data is not findable. Accessible. The data has to be coded using standards, international standards. There are medical standards to put information, so the data has to be captured using this standard. The data has to be interoperable. Interoperable means that using the standards, the information can be used not just by humans, but also by computers. And this is a maybe it's a little bit complicated, and we can spend maybe another webinar to understand this, but this is interoperable means that the data has to follow standards as well. And the most important thing is reusable. The data, when it's collected, has to be available to be reused. If the data collected by a survey is proprietary from a company, a person, whatever, and nobody knows about the data, it's useless. It's just for this use. And you will spend time working for the interest of one person, one company. It's okay. We have to work to produce information. We have to make sure the information is available. And this is, I guess, my last slide. This is connected with the strategy of the European Federation. One of the initiatives we are starting right now is the CAP, the Community Advisory Board. One of the activities of the CAP is to make sure the data produced is following the FAIR principles, and the most important thing, and this is something that we have to change, is create a new situation when the patient is the owner of the data. Because if we are the owners of the data, we can make decisions. If somebody else has the data, we won't be able to make decisions about the data we are creating. And the most important thing, this data is to create new treatments for Dravet syndrome. And this is the primary goal and the primary use that we have to protect as Dravet community. Thank you very much for your attention, and let me know if you have some questions. I guess we have 15 minutes or 14 minutes, right?
Okay, you can put your questions in the chat or raise your hands, but meanwhile, I will ask Julian about the clinical data in the first step before the orphan drug designation. You have told us that it is important to have data with the results of the animal and cells experiments. So, but sometimes it is not possible, no, because you don't know you have told about fenfluramine, but other drugs are really not proof in human. So, what's the type of data you need in that moment about equivalent, about other drugs, similar drugs, or about interactions or something like that?
You mean for the orphan drug designation, to get the orphan drug designation? This is a very important question, because if you are taking the regulation, the European regulation, you don't really need clinical data. Just with the hypothesis and the medical plausibility will be enough to get the orphan designation. So this is one requirement that most of the sponsors are trying to get, but it's not mandatory. You can get the orphan drug designation because sometimes it's not easy to get data, right? For example, if you are working in a gene therapy, getting real data from real patients will mean a big risk. You have to put patients in the treatment, you have to spend some time, you have to wait for adverse reactions, and it could take a lot of time. And because the European regulation is trying to foster innovation and speed, for orphan designation, for the initial designation, you don't need it. You can ask for the orphan designation just with the medical plausibility.
Okay, there is a question in the chat and another hand raised. Well, the question in the chat is about time, no, or how to solve this long time in the process, and if you think in the future it is going to change, maybe with this experience of the COVID, there will be change the environment or something like that, no? And I want to add a little question to this one is there is different roads if the disease is severe or it is not severe.
Yes, from a regulatory point of view, and we didn't cover this today, but there is a particular process that the EMA has where the condition is severe, debilitating, with high mortality. It's called PRIME, P-R-I-M-E. And the EMA used this process to accelerate assessment. One example we have in Europe is spinal muscular atrophy. You know, for this condition, we use PRIME to accelerate assessment, and they were able to get approval from the beginning to the end in a couple of years in a very, very fast way. But this condition is very debilitating. You know, the children, most of them die before 10. But for Dravet, if a company is interested on, you know, following this path, it's doable, right? But it's up to the sponsor, up to the company to ask for PRIME. But the regulation allows this fast assessment. The question about the speed and how to accelerate that process was complex. You know, the first solution will be have money. If you have a lot of money, you can spend money in multiple experiments, clinical trials, clinical data collection, as we did for the vaccines, right? But for rare diseases, this is rare. Usually the companies and the community, they don't have a lot of money. I mean, thousands of millions, right? When I say a lot of money. And the other approach to increase velocity is reduce the risk of the pharma. Because the issue is pharma companies are responsible for making drugs, and they are taking a big risk. If you are doing a clinical trial and a patient die because of the product, your product is gone. And in most of the cases, the company is gone as well, right? So the risk is very high. And the industry, they are not able to take big risk. How we can help with data to reduce the risk? For example, if we will have a database with the genetic information of our patients, a full genetic information, a company interested on a gene therapy will have information looking for adverse effects, off targets, problems with the drug. The only way we have to reduce risk is reduce uncertainty. And this is because collecting information. This is the only way we have. Is more money, more information, and more patients as well, right? If the organization is very well organized, is able to recruit patients, we have a strong organization in all the countries. And when the company is doing, I want patients, we are able to say, okay, you have patients here, 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 and here. This will facilitate the process. But it's not easy. Everybody's looking for the same thing.
Thanks, Julian. Pili has a question.
I was raising my hands because I wanted to point to the chat that there are some questions. So, but Luis, me already monitored the questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. There are two other questions in the chat, Julian. One is about, it's an example of, they are asking about the time of the process, no? And they are putting an example, Stop Therapeutics is in trials at this moment. How much time does it last from the moment now for stock to the approval, more or less?
Yeah, it depends of also the resources of the company. You know, there are companies going very fast and they ask orphan data designation in a very fast way, and they do clinical trials in multiple centers in a very fast way. So it depends totally of the company and the resources they have. The company is a commercial company. They don't have unlimited resources. They will be happy being fast. You know, they want to be fast as well. They are people trying to provide solution to people, right? And from a commercial point of view, it's much more better to be faster. But the problem is sometimes the resources are limited. And if I remember well, for this particular example of Stoke, I don't think they have the orphan designation in Europe. They don't need it. I don't know about the commercial, the strategy of the company regarding the designation, but definitely the full process, I mean, between having the designation, having marketing authorization, can be 1 year if the company is fast, but it's up to the company. The company can, the process can be very fast if the company is, you know, providing the resources and looking for this goal. But also remember, the company has to be very cautious because not taking a lot of risk. If they make a mistake and something happens, the product will be killed.
Yes, we must consider that in this case, the approach of stock makes an special trials, no, with fewer patients and long trials, no, maybe. Okay.
Hard to say on this point.
Other question here in the chat is it's about, I think it's not, you can tell us better, is maybe national
Yeah.
role, is about the compassionate use of the new drug.
But compassionate use of a new drug is when the drug is not full approved and the patient is asking for use, right? Or the doctor is asking for use, because it's the doctor responsible for asking for use, not the patient. This is a national decision. The national authorities or the national agencies are responsible for providing compassionate use and off-label use. Off-label use is using a drug with a different indication for a different condition. For example, Depakine or valproate acid. Most of you are using valproate right now. Valproate doesn't have an indication for Dravet. Has a general indication for epilepsy or whatever, right? And most of us, we are using Depakine as off-label. We don't have the indication, but we use because we don't have other alternative, right? But for these decisions are local decisions. The EMA is not taking those decisions.
Okay, Peter has a question.
Yes, to this topic about the compassionate use. So if, for example, a patient from a country where the trial is not made, so will not have any access to compassionate use. Is this correct? So compassionate use is only available for the persons or for patients that could not participate in a trial?
No.
But got up, or is it only for people? Can you explain compassionate use? Who in general has access to it?
Compassionate use means the patient doesn't have an approved treatment, and the physician is asking for an exception. That's simple.
But asking the company who's doing the trial.
No. If the company is not providing the product, the company is not enforced to do it. It has to be voluntary for the company. For example, let's take an example. A company called A is doing a clinical trial in Germany for a gene therapy for Dravet, for example, right? There is a patient in France asking for this treatment, right? For compassionate, because there is not available treatment in France. So the physician in France is asking to the pharma if the pharma will be willing to. The pharma doesn't have any obligation to do it, any at all, right? And they don't have obligation to continue to supplying the drug, any. It's totally voluntary to the company. If the company consents and they are happy to provide this drug, the physician has to fill a request with the French authority, and the French authority will check the situation, the patient, the severity, everything, and they will say yes or not. And if that happens, the physician contact the company and the patient can have the treatment. Okay. But it doesn't matter if there is a clinical trial in the country or not. No.
Okay, so but it is possible in a cross-border to step into a compassionate use if you cross the border. So it would be, for example, possible also for patients in Romania, but they have to check, the physician has to check the authorities. If the authorities allow, then the physician has to contact the company if they do it voluntarily.
And exactly, and the company has to be positive with this, because this is expensive for the company. If everybody is asking for this in Europe, the company won't be able to. And when a company is developing a product, all are expenses. They don't have any income, right? So they have to balance the expenses and the future income, if this is approved, because if not, they will be in an unbalanced economical situation. You know what I mean? Imagine, for example, a company is releasing authorization for compassionate use in all Europe, and the product is not approved. They won't get any money, and it's going to be a financial problem, a big financial problem. So it's a balance between risk, financial, the benefit of the patients is, I have a strong, appreciation for the work that the pharmacy is doing as well to make everything balanced, right? Because it's not easy.
Okay, there is another question, Chris, I think.
Yeah, Julian, thanks for the talk. It was very interesting how this all works on European level. I have a question about the data, our data. And this is the question: if you say we have to make sure that the data we are gathering is belonging to us, then we are very well organized. So if you on European level provide some template or some information how the patients should act when they are asked for data, then we are in a strong position, right?
Yeah.
So if some company is asking for data, and we say the European Federation said, here we have some document. Is this open data? Is this fair? And all the patients respond with the same documentation, then they are forced to do their studies in this way and provide the raw data fair. So I think it's up to us, right, to get this working.
Yeah, it's totally up to us. But it's a very good point, Chris. Maybe we need to think about creating this small documentation, not just for the people on this call, also for the community as well. Europe, yes, exactly. Explaining why data has to be fair, what fair means, and what the checklist they have to follow. The same, probably more or less the same checklist I already shared with you, in order people can find a reference that they can use where somebody is approaching them asking for data, right? This is a very good suggestion, Chris. Maybe it's a question that the board and Luzmi and myself, we have to discuss, and produce this documentation. It's a very, very good point.
Welcome.
Okay, we are in the time now. Another question. You have sent us a challenge, not now, but this kind of collecting data is a big effort for the Federation. What more do you need in the European Medicine Agency? What do you think that patient or Federation can work on?
I guess the most critical need are PROs, patient-reported outcomes, because at the end, clinical data, where the companies are doing clinical studies or clinical trials, they have to collect clinical data. But from a regulatory point of view, something that we are missing deeply are PRONs, patient-reported outcomes. The information about how is the situation, how the condition is affecting you, how is the situation at home, how the new products are being able to change this condition. Are seizures the most important clinical data for you, or are behaviors? What the challenges you are facing as caregivers, this type of things. Because the new drugs has to be able to modify this. Not all is about seizures, and you know very well this. And we have children with a lot of seizures and some more or less good cognitive condition, and the other way around. We have children with poor cognitive condition and not really a lot of seizures, right? So Dravet is not about the number of seizures. It's important for sure, I won't say a different thing, but what I'm saying is that on top of seizures is the quality of life of patients. And the most important data the EMA is asking for all the time is how new treatments are affecting the quality of life of people.
Okay, I don't know if we...
Simona is asking a question about ATMPs. This is ATMP is the acronym for advanced therapies. For the people who is not familiar with, Simona is really an expert. And ATMPs, they only have the difference that the CAT, which is another committee, has to be involved in the approval. But this committee is super technical. The CAT is super technical because they are treating with advanced therapies. For example, gene therapy or antisense therapies. They are therapies that this committee is evaluating. So from a regulatory point, these techniques, they have an additional step, which is CAT approval. But this is a very technical process. And for well-established procedures like antisense or gene therapy, the process can be very fast because they know this very well. And we know right now where risks for AAVs or AAVs is right now, or for antisense therapies or ARN-based therapies. It's a little bit more difficult, but it's not super complicated right now, because another situation that is happening right now is most of the new treatments are based on advanced therapies.
So ATMP is the shortage for advanced therapy.
I don't remember the MP. Probably Simona knows.
Medicinal products.
Medicinal products.
We're chatting about the acronyms. So
somebody's asking for the EMA process is different. A new drug is already registered in the UK. The EMA don't care if the drug is registered in UK right now. Because of the Brexit, UK is following a totally different pathway. And if we have a drug approved in UK, the EMA has to do the full evaluation. It's the same for the FDA. If the FDA, which is the American agency, if they have, they already approve a drug, the EMA has to do the full evaluation because the regulation is different as well. You know, the FDA doesn't have the concept of significant benefit, and also the prevalence in the US is calculated in a different way.
I have a question. So you were talking about the clinical data and the data that will be collected in PROMS. So just to have an example about what kind of data means the quality of life data. Does that mean how the patient feels the day? Does that mean what kind of information? Just some examples, just to get an idea what kind of data is collected in the PRO versus to the clinical data. So
understood. For example, the typical PRO for Dravet will be, is the patient able to do more outdoor activities? It's a typical example. It's not about seizures. It's about the capacity of the patient to be more independent, do more activities, having being the family more relaxed, you know, is the value. When you are doing a clinical assessment, it's about signals, seizures, ability to walk, whatever. But this has to be transformed on how you are affected as a patient. If you have seizures just at night, probably it's much more better than having seizures in the school all days, you know? The seizure is the same, it's the clinical data, but the impact is different. With PROs, we are capturing the impact of the clinical signals.
And this is the data which is asked by the industry beside the clinical data they collect if they do clinical trials, yeah?
They can capture this data during the clinical trial. And usually they do, you know. They have questionnaires, they have different way to capture this data. But the EMA prefers if this data comes from the patient organizations, because we don't have any filters, right? And we are able to provide this information. And the funny thing is, seizures is a data reported by patients. If you think about how data for seizures is collected, this is happening when you are going to the doctor and the doctor is asking to you, oh, how many seizures do you have the last 3 months? Who is observing this clinical entity? Is the patient. So the most important data for drug development in epilepsy, at the end, is a data captured by the patient. We don't have any medical device to capture seizures. We, as caregivers, are responsible for.
Okay, something I think different between pros and data, clinical data, is that sometimes in the answer of the questions of pros, the involvement is a global involvement to all the family, no? How many days the kid is not going to the school, no? Involves an impact, social impact, economic impact, that maybe. Okay, there is a other question there about these countries that they are not in the European community.
But Serbia is part of the European Union, right? Let me check very quickly. Let me check if Serbia. There are some countries that they are not part of the European Union. For example, some Nordic countries, Switzerland, but Serbia. Let me check.
So there's a participant from Serbia asking this.
Yeah,
so
Alexandra. Yes, I can see.
Mm-hmm.
Let me check. The problem, maybe Alexander is asking not for approval, but for, because one thing is marketing authorization. Marketing authorization means the company can go to any country and ask for price, but this is not happening in all countries. Usually, the companies are going to the big five countries first: Germany, France, Spain, Italy, UK, because it's faster for them. And usually, it's less complicated. There is a well-established process, and is much more convenient for them. And the problem we have is the access to drug is not balanced in Europe. We have Germany, where you guys are very lucky because most of the new drugs are being approved automatically in Germany. In other countries, it's taking years, and in other countries, this never happens. But it's not because the drug is not approved. It's because or the company is not asking for price, or the government is rejecting to give a price. But Serbia, no, yeah, probably Serbia is not. Is Croatia is member? Croatia is member of the COMP. My friend Dinko is responsible, and Serbia, no.
So for countries not being in the EU, the EMA authorization, is it valid or is it not valid? Do they have an eye on it, or how do they proceed?
They are not part of the European Union, and if they want to get access to the product, the company has to go to the country and ask for approval for marketing authorization. In these countries, if there is an European approval, the process usually is much more easier, right? Because they don't have the capacity to do a full assessment. I don't think the agency in Serbia will be able to do a full assessment. And if that happening, usually having a European marketing authorization helps, but the national authority is responsible for.
Okay, we are going to finish the webinar. Thanks, Julian, for the talk and for all the answers to our questions. I think we have a work to do in this future, and we have to do quick, faster, and maybe working close with the national associations in the terms that you have explained, no? The data, how to collect data, and how to talk about this important issue with all the different stakeholders and try to show them what important this question is, this issue is, no? Because sometimes we are not really thinking about data as the important issue that it is. So thank you very much. Thank you all of you for being here. We'll see in the next webinar or in the next actions of the Federation. So we need people, we need time, we need money to develop strategic action and tags, and we will be working all together in the future and in the next weeks. So Billy, do you have something to close the webinar?
Blah, 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 blah with the mute. So sorry. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Julian. Thank you, Louise, me for making this great first webinar. And just one more thing to remember, to just say it again. The next webinar will be on cell therapy, explanation about cell therapy, and we will also have one especially on the CRISPR method for Dravet syndrome. So yeah, check out our Facebook page, and we will spread all the upcoming events on the Facebook page. And we love it if you share it and support us, and get in communication with us. Whoever wants to join us in our work is welcome. That's it. I say bye-bye from Germany. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the name of DSEF.